I am here with Izzy Rodriguez, and we're going to talk today about race. There's a lot going on right now in our country in regards to race, especially in the body of Christ as well. And if my wife, this is why I wanted to do this talk, if my wife said something to me that I disagreed with, she's my wife. I'm not allowed to just blow it off and be like, well, you're stupid, honey.
Yeah.
As a Christian who's married, like she's in my family, it's my job to lean in and say, tell me more. And in DeKalb County, we're kind of closed off from a lot of the race picture. It's just how God put us, and that is, I mean, there's nothing right or wrong about that. It's just where God put us. But when there is a crying out of others of a different race, it's like, especially if they're Christians, it is not right. Racism is sin, period, right? It's sin, period. No ifs, ands, or buts, it's sin. And so it's not right for me to just blow it off and say, well, we disagree with you, you're stupid. I have to lean in and say, tell me more. Doesn't mean I have to agree, but I have to lean in and say, tell me more. And I wanted to do that, and I reached out and connected with my friend, Izzy Rodriguez. Izzy, talk to us a little bit about who you are. What qualifies you to talk about race?
Well, as we've said before, like for me, my experience has been I actually grew up in a small white town in Arkansas. Not much diversity there at all, but I did grow up with a Puerto Rican father and an Irish mother, and so best of both worlds, I'd like to think. But what we did was, throughout my life, I still was surrounded mostly by white culture. When I got more into high school and college, I experienced more diversity, which I found very exciting and intriguing. And then it was kind of as I was taking my steps into youth ministry, I had an opportunity to take a a job as a counselor for a camp that was urban inner city ministry, and that camp changed my life. It opened my eyes to some of my own biases that I had to work through, and then even from there, I guess about 2 or 3 years later, was when I first got the call to ministry with Youth for Christ, and was at a um, inner city school in Fort Wayne with a diverse staff. My boss was a Black man who is a predominant Black pastor here in Fort Wayne, and learned a lot from him during my years of ministry with Youth for Christ. We had lots of conversations about race, some where I had to, honestly ask ignorant questions in order to understand things. And I was just very thankful for someone who would have those very meaningful conversations with me and talk with me about things, and helped me to, do something, have an effective ministry in my life. And so from that time on, that's been multiculturalism has been something that's very important to me, which again is being inclusive and loving to all people. And so I found myself often having conversations with people, some asking, why are you so passionate about this? You're not Black. And I'm like, because it's multiculturalism. And like for me, we all matter. I'm trying to love us all. And I'm trying to show us that we have more in common, especially those who have faith in Jesus, than we ever understood, and trying to help bridge that gap and bring people together.
Very good. Thank you, Izzy. It was a few weeks ago when I heard about George Floyd and then watched his murder. I assume you watched the murder of George Floyd. You've seen it.
I did not watch it for over a week. Um, I was aware of what happened. I had seen still shots of it, but quite honestly, I can't even watch it anymore. There's a feeling of obligation that I need to see and understand and witness and testify to what is going on. Um, hey guys, I'm doing something here. You can take that to your room, yes.
This for you.
Thank you. two of my four children.
Wonderful.
Um, but I really didn't watch it because it's one of those things that um, I know it happened. I know the abuse that can happen. And hold on just a second here.
Okay.
Get your stuff and go back up the stairs, please. I told you quiet time upstairs. Go on. So actually, I really did not watch that video for over a week. For me, it was very hard because I find myself like feeling rage when I see some of these things, just because I just want to scream, it's not right. That's not how you treat people. And so over and over again, when these kind of things come out, I find that my reaction is just such anger and rage that I don't know how useful I am sometimes. So for me, I did not watch it for over a week. It was only about, well, I guess, yeah, about now a week ago that I actually watched something that kind of said, here's all the videos from different angles, all that happened, and here's the timeline. And I mean, I knew the story and I knew about George Floyd and who he was through some Christianity Today articles that I thought were very powerful, that kind of chronicled his life as a person of faith. But yeah, I really, when I finally watched the video, I mean, it was physical rage. I just remember slamming my hands on the countertop and just feeling like, how is this possible in the world we live in the country we live in, that espouses the beliefs and values that we say we do, which again, I would say, again, my experience is that it is just that, an exposition. It's something that we say. It's not something that's truly held deep into the culture of our existence. But yeah, it was just a lot of anger, and I think that's really where it got. I mean, it's taken me a while, even after that. Probably it took me probably a good hour to 2 hours to really just be able to quiet my heart and say again, God, make me an agent of peace. Help me to know when to speak. Help me to know when to listen. Help me to be a part of growth for those that I love and those that I come in contact with. Yeah, I don't know. I think that was kind of what happened with me.
In my perception, anyhow, and I think for a lot of people, like, I like the idea that the police are good. And I believe that. Like, police are good. I tell my kids, if you have a trouble, run to the police. Every time I see an officer that's not like doing something, they're busy, but like anytime there's like an officer hanging out, I take my kids over and I say, hey, you can, anytime you see an officer, you can trust them.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. But of course, there's some officers that are dirty. I've watched enough movies to know that there's some dirty cops out there. What would you say to someone who said, like, who writes this off and says, you don't know what George Floyd would have done. You don't know how, like officers have to use force to protect their own lives. I mean, there's a reason they carry guns and other tools to keep the community and themselves safe. What would you say to someone that would just be like, well, if you don't want an interaction with the police, don't break the law. George Floyd must have been breaking the law. And certainly George Floyd, I believe, had done something, or he probably did something for the police to even notice him to begin with. What would you say to that? Can you respond?
I think for me, well, I think, again, it's a very complex thing. First of all, I would say policing is broken. I think it is overall broken. when and some of that's because we ask too much of police. I do think that's true too. I think there is too much that is on their plate. They shouldn't have to be a mental health counselor. They shouldn't have to be a domestic counselor. All these type of things that are thrown at them and put on their plates as police officers. I don't know that they're properly trained for all those things. The thing that I would wish that I could believe that police officers would be good at would be de-escalation of tense events. So that when we walk into a situation and we feel tension of one sort or another, to be able to learn to de-escalate that situation. Now, again, I have police officers that have been very close to me in my life, who have shared with me the burden of their job, the concerns of their job, their feeling that no one understands them or their job. So this, it's not one of those things that I do believe all police are bad, or that all police are good. To me, my assumption tends to be, I will give respect to the position, but I don't even desire to interact much anymore. Like for me, if I see a police officer who is friendly, who, again, I DJ on the weekends. So there's often times that I will have a police officer there at the reception hall, making sure everything goes well. I don't make it a point to interact. I don't avoid interaction. Sometimes I'm putting something away and they're walking past me and I'll say, good evening, be polite. But unless it's someone that I know, I don't have much desire to find out, which are you? So for me, it's a matter of, I will almost refrain and sometimes from that interaction. And that's because of a personal interaction I had. And again, it is very confusing for me still. Again, like I said, this is not something where I'm going, hey, boom, I got all the answers for you. This is just one person's perspective. I do have concerns when I try to talk with my children about police officers. And I want to be able to say, hey, police officer people you can trust. And I think at a younger age, I still feel okay with that. For my teenager, I have had some discussion about saying, listen, we don't talk about things that we don't need to talk about with police officers. If we have an interaction with a police officer, we can be friendly, if they begin to ask you questions, we're not interested in having deep conversations about things that we don't need to, because of self-incrimination that I've seen happen with some unfortunate circumstances. But kind of getting back to one of the things that has caused my interactions to be a little bit more tenuous, or maybe not as completely trusting, was being an employee at a store. And I had my job is customer service. And I had a young lady was walking through my area. I was working in drapery. And I said, hey, the finials and the drapery rods that you're looking at there, those are very nice, but I'll show you, these here are very similar, and they're actually on sale right now. It's a really great brand. And she said, if I wanted your help, I would have asked for it. And I said,
Was her name
okay.
Karen? Was her name Karen?
I mean, today, yes, exactly. Yeah. It would be Karen. And so I just said, I was like, oh, okay. So I turned around and got back to working on some displays that I was working at. And I don't know, probably 5 minutes passed, and she said, okay, well, I guess I need your help now. And I mean, I'm known to be a bit of a funny guy. And I said, oh, you need my help now, do you? And I said, what can I do to help you? And she says, I want to talk to your manager. And I said, I'm right here. Like I can help you. What do you need? No, I don't want your help. I need your manager. You've been rude to me. And I said, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to work then, and you can go get the manager, and I'll talk to you later. No, you go get them. Oh no, I won't be going to get them. You can go find the manager. I'm gonna continue to do my work. Kind of just, it was one of those weird circumstances, but I felt, I felt like this was someone picking on me because of who I was, and in this circumstance, being a minority. And so I was like, oh no, you're not gonna get me to go run away and go, hey, boss, come discipline me. I'm like, you can go find him yourself. I'm going back to work. So, the situation kind of passes. She gets a certain percentage off of all of her purchases that day. And my boss said, what happened? I said, the only thing that I could do, I've done better, is maybe not quite be as sarcastic. I said, oh, well, now you want my help. Okay, well, I can. But I was very lighthearted in the first place. And so the fact that it was taken from that lighthearted to you've disrespected me I was like, that's just beyond me. That's just craziness. So a week goes by, and mind you, I could not tell you what that woman looked like if she was standing right in front of me today. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I just kind of was like, dude, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going to harbor bad feelings about that. I'm moving on. So a week goes by. I'm still back there doing my work again, and something similar comes by. And I say, hey, if you need help today, I'll be right over here on the corner. Do not talk to me, Izzy. We have had a disagreement. And I look, and I'm just going, oh, you've got to be kidding me. I still don't even really recognize her, but I know what that must have meant. And I
Yeah.
said, ma'am, listen, I'm trying to be friendly and do my job here and help people out. My manager is around the corner. She comes over immediately and says, can I help you? And she said, Izzy, why don't you just go on up to register? Sure thing. So again, de-escalation. I'm out of the situation. And I go up to the front register, and I'm kind of heated because I'm going, okay, this woman's coming back looking for trouble. So I'm up there working, and I notice a guy come storming into the store, walks up and gets in my lane. Well, someone else opens up a lane right next to me and says, hey, I can actually help you here. And he's like, nope. And I'm like, okay. So he gets up to me and he says, listen here, pulls up his badge and says, you ever talk to my girlfriend again, you're going to have trouble. And, I grab the intercom, and I'm like, manager to aisle 2, slammed it down and walked off. And I'm just like, screw this. I'm not getting, I'm not doing this. So I walk up to the break room, and I'm just, again, de-escalating, getting myself out of the situation. And boss is just up there going, just stay up here. Don't worry about it. Well, 15 minutes pass, police officers arrive. They come up to the break room to talk with me and say that I have been harassing this woman, and they're going to file a police report.
What?
And I'm like, I said, now how, I said, what do you need to hear about this? Do you want to go check the cameras? I'm like, what have I done? And they're like, no, we have to file a report. She called the police. And I said, do you want to get the badge number of the guy who just threatened me? That's a police officer. And they said, well, his number will be on here. And it was just absolutely the most humiliating and feeling of helplessness that I've ever had in my life. Because like you have said, I've always grown up, the police are the good guys. They don't arrest you if you don't do anything wrong. You don't get police reports on you if you don't do anything wrong. And absolutely felt like, well, if you can't trust them, who do you trust? And so again, I was fortunate that I did have, again, 2 top friends who I called and I said, man, tell me I did something wrong here. Tell me what I should have done better. And they said, nothing. It's bull crap. It's junk. And I said, so what do I do? I mean, do I report him? You know, do I pursue this? Do I call in and file a report against him for behaving this way? And they said, well, you can. And if you do, he's going to get reprimanded. They'll also guarantee you're going to get pulled over in the next 2 weeks. And you will get a ticket. You know, and so it's like they're just being honest with me. Like, if you file this report against him, they're going to get you in some fashion. You know, again, minimal tickets, what, $100? They're going to cost you money. You're going to get harassed. And again, both of these officers did not work in that same department, but they were like, it's junk, and I'm sorry that you've gone through that. You know, and so that experience did change the way I saw things. And again, I'm not going to say again that I just go, hey, I'm not going to ever, you know, talk to a police officer, because obviously, again, I've still interacted with police officers, and I've had great interactions with police officers. One of the guys that I DJ'd his wedding a few years back was a police officer. Ended up selling him a house. Like, we've continued to be good friends, and I was very proud and moved by the fact that he did speak up with this last thing, saying, if anyone ever thought that that would be okay, it's not. And for most of us police officers, just understand that's not acceptable. And that was meaningful to me, because that's what, you know, I think we need more of is saying, when there is someone doing wrong, who is transgressing against the people they serve, it has to be called out. And I think that has been, you know, the problem. And the thing is, Adam, like I said, if I think back to my childhood, you know, and the stuff that I got away with living in a small town, I can tell you all the people who hated the cops or talked poorly about the cops, they're white people. You know what I mean? Going, this again is not specifically a race thing. What we saw with George Floyd, I think, is more an example of race in policing. But I think there are lots of people who have experienced this. But the problem is that it is disproportionately right now one race. And that's why, you know, when people that I love post all lives matter, it's been, do I say something? Is it worth the conversation, or is it just going to make things, you know, like make an argument? And so it was, yeah, it's been a tough thing to say. You know, the reason why I am supporting, you know, Black Lives Matter right now is because I do agree all lives matter. And once we understand that Black lives are under attack right now, we will be able to say all lives matter. But we've got too many people who refuse to see that there is a disproportionate amount of over-policing and these type of incidents happening to one race over the other.
I'm pausing because I'm writing it down. What you just said,
It's okay.
spectacular. We realize that when we realize that Black lives are under attack right now, then we will be able to say that all lives matter.
Or when I hear that too, I go, well, if you truly do believe that all lives matter, then aren't you mad as well? Aren't you frustrated with me about this? Because if that's what you're saying, then you must be upset like I am.
I gotta decline the phone call. When you have COVID-19, people like to call you a lot.
Yeah. It means you got people that love you, man. It always feels
I do.
good.
Yeah, so I love what you're saying. If you believe that all lives matter, then don't you care about the ones that are hurting?
Yeah. Then you must be telling me that you're mad right now, that you're upset with what's going on because you believe. And then the illustration that I saw that I thought was beautiful was an illustration of a bunch of sheep on the mountaintop, and the shepherd over towards the cliff with one, black sheep hanging over the cliff, and all of the other sheep that were fine up on safely on the mountain, holding up signs that say all lives matter. And just this idea that's going, oh no, no, we're not saying all lives don't matter. We're saying that this one's in distress. This one's falling off the cliff right now and needs some extra attention. And just like Jesus said, I would leave the 99 to rescue the one, is what I feel I am called to do right now for my faith, is not to forget everyone else in my family or all the other people that I work with and live with in community. But I'm saying this person needs extra attention. And like you've said, a lot of times this goes back to family. That's the same thing. It's like, man, listen, when I've got one child that's going through something, they take up extra time because I'm trying to help them through something. And the other ones sometimes, unfortunately, even suffer a little bit because I have to focus on something. But it doesn't mean I don't give that attention. It doesn't mean I don't give what is necessary to take care of my family.
Izzy, I really appreciate your story and you being courageous enough to share it. I hope you don't get pulled over for sharing it in this video. uh,
Yeah.
I believe, like, I had a few questions down, but you kind of hit them all in your talking. I believe that all lives matter. And because I believe all lives matter, Black lives are lives,
Mhm.
and brown lives are lives. And if there's a systemic, um, even systematized, or maybe not systematized, it's just a lot of people don't care as much. I mean, like there's a, I don't know. I've heard enough stories, and because I keep asking people, to tell me their stories. I've heard enough stories to realize that um, there is such a thing as driving while black or driving while brown.
Yeah.
There is such a thing, and for a while, I just thought it was, in every race, in every county, any place in America, there's somebody who's lazy who blames other people for all their problems. I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was that, like just isolated incidences. But it wasn't until I heard some stories like yours, like, okay, there's some things that are actually racially motivated. So because I believe all lives matter, I have to believe that Black ones matter too. And they're the ones that are hurting. I feel confused. I feel like helpless, I guess. I want to be able to help, but I don't know what I can do to help. What would you say to me?
Again, that's the first step. And you're even in the second step of asking people for their stories and listening to them and believing them. I think again, I don't know, I was raised, and again, God help me, I'm not trying to talk bad about my family, but that certain pastors weren't credible. And as I look back on it, I think a lot of that had to do with race.
Oh, wow.
And again, like I said, my family is good people, and they're trying to love the Lord and figure things out. But I think just even the way I was raised, some of the things that I think when I've been having these conversations, the things that I'm saying are, one is to realize you are prejudiced, and I point, and again, I've got more fingers pointing back at me than that are pointing at you. I am prejudiced. I think people who look like me, talk like me, and have a lot of things in common with me are better than other people. It is a natural thing that the people who, again, like Bears fans are predominantly better than Packers fans. It's a statement of fact. It's just the way life is. We can't help it. But that commonality, it's you tend to think that people who are like you, no matter what elements we're speaking about, are better than others because they're like you.
Yeah.
So that in itself is not sinful. To allow prejudice to keep you from finding out more about other people is what I think is sinful. When you allow it to shape how you treat other people, that is sinful. I mean, I'm joking about it, but I really do. When someone comes in and they've got a Green Bay Packers shirt on, I'm going, ugh. But I don't say, I don't ever want to talk to you again. I go, so how are you doing today? And I have a conversation and I figure out, you know what, you're not so bad after all, even though you're a Packers fan. But that's the reality of going, yes, I have a prejudice. I think that people who like that team are a certain way, but I'm not going to let it keep me from having a conversation.
Right.
And so when we realize that we have these prejudices in our life, and some of that, sometimes they can save you. Like, say again, if I'm walking down the street downtown Fort Wayne and I see a rowdy bunch of guys coming down the road, my prejudice is going to say, maybe I should get to the other side. If those kids are rowdy and causing a ruckus, I might need to move. That is a prejudice. It could be true. It could not be true. But if I see all those kids, if they all walk into my wedding reception and they're all trying to have fun and they come up to me and they say, pardon me, sir, would you play a song for me? And I say, no, I know your type. I've allowed the prejudice to become sinful.
I see.
So it's like prejudices are just things that kind of are vibes that we have, which aren't necessarily sinful if they keep you from knowing someone, from getting to know someone or loving someone. That's where they're troublesome. So the first thing I would say is realize your prejudice and admit it and come to terms with that. You're not perfect. You like people who are like you. Um, and the second thing I think is the recordings in our head. You've mentioned it as we've talked here, that there is a certain type of person who can be lazy. It's a recording, something you were taught. And for me, like Chinese people all speak with a certain accent. That's a recording. Is it true? Not always. Or I was taught certain things about what Indian people are like when I was growing up. I was taught, a lot of different things about different types of people growing up. I was taught these things. You heard them in jokes. You heard them in stories. And I have all kinds of recordings in my head. Now, the first time I met an Asian girl that didn't have an accent, I was like, what? I thought you all talked a certain way. And all of a sudden, I'm realizing my recording was wrong, that that's not the truth. My recording that was in my head is not true. Or when I worked at a radio station here in Fort Wayne and was working with a bunch of Black guys who were some of the hardest working guys I'd ever met, who would work at the station, then they go work their full-time job, but they loved working in a radio. And I would see them hustle and work hard to do what they loved. Wow, that lazy thing, that's not right about these guys. To begin to understand you have recordings about people and to dissect them. Is that really true? And even if you meet someone who fulfills the recording, to remember that's not really true about everyone. Because again, if you were to take just me and think, oh, that's what all Puerto Rican guys are like, I think you'd be missing out. There's a lot of guys that are way cooler than me and have a lot more fun in life and doing exciting things. but it's like, but you can't just let a recording that you have about someone stay, especially when you find out it's not true. Break up that recording. And then the third thing is what I think I've always done well, and it's helped me in life, is just finding common ground. Like when you start to find common ground, man, you will look over an abundance of sin because there's someone like you. You have a commonality. Again, it goes back to that premier prejudice. When I find out someone's a Bears fan and they step on my toe, I'm like, hey, buddy, be careful. I'm not going, why'd you just step on my foot? And I'm not irate about something because it's like, no, we've got commonality. We have things we like. And, I love music. I love comic books. I love sports. And so there's lots of ways for me to find commonality with people. And it's something that I feel like I'm probably pretty good at, and I enjoy it. I like finding connections. So, if I'm thinking of things that you can do is one, just realize you're prejudiced. Not racist. I'm not saying racist. Understand, again, there's a distinction between those two things.
Yeah, I get it.
That you are prejudiced, that you have things that you think about other people that just aren't true, and you got to give yourself a chance to break those recordings. And third, just find the commonalities that you do have. Because like you said, man, when all of a sudden you start to find out, oh, what, we both love Jesus? Oh, man, we're part of the family already then, aren't we? And so, or like, you like the Bears? Oh, man, you're part of my family. And when we do that, it makes people's mistakes a lot more bearable. But you also pay a lot more attention to their stories because you know who they are. You know that this is someone you care about, and they're not just making things up. This is not something that's just a ploy to get attention. These are someone's stories who are telling you their reality. They're trying to be honest with you. Hear them.
Yeah. Thank you, Izzy. I really appreciate the time you took today to just speak your heart and call me prejudiced. I didn't realize it. Honestly, I didn't realize it until I had that frame of reference. So I'm glad I leaned in and said, tell me more.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say to me or to anybody who may watch this later?
I just remember, none of us have it figured out. None of us do. I mean, anyone that tells you that they got all the answers, that's the person you got to be leery of. But to just simply know that this, this side of heaven, it's going to be tough, but you are given the love of Christ through Jesus, not to sit back and hoard it and go, isn't that so good for me and mine? But we're given the love of Christ to be the person who communicates it, who shares it, who gives it out, and to be willing to give that love out, even if it's unmerited, even if it is trampled on. That it is our job to share that love and to not hoard it, but to share it daily. And maybe in this time again, you can join me in that prayer of going, make me an agent of peace, make me know when to speak and when to listen. And may we communicate and share the love of Christ with those that we come in contact with today.
Those are great words, Izzy. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.